Wong Kar-wai, Hong Kong director, screenwriter and producer, and someone who I wasn't familiar with until like a year ago, despite me literally studying a film course at university. It's embarrassing. I mean, it wasn't like I was taking a stance against watching anything that wasn't in English or anything extreme like that. I just genuinely didn't know who he was, because I didn't really develop a strong fondness for films until very recently. It was simply a matter of ignorance, and I kind of wish I'd watched some of his filmography earlier because man is it really good. Wong Kar-wai's whole appeal, from my understanding, is that his films are primarily categorized based on vibes. His narratives are often non-linear, having multiple stories in one film that kind of feel disjointed and unconventional, but is all tied together by one central theme. On top of this, the cinematography and notable needle drops within the films make them unique and memorable viewing experiences. Colour is also very significant in creating this atmosphere and world, so his films flout basically what make up your traditional film, which I know on paper sounds very pretentious, because even I thought so too. When a friend first introduced me to Wong Kar-wai, I kind of didn't get it. I remember watching the film they recommended me and it just kind of left me confused. To me, at the time, it just kind of felt like one of those overrated, deep pieces of media that TikTok ended up getting its hands on, and so it earned some kind of status. But man, I was so wrong about that. It was just a textbook example of me judging a book by its cover, which I admit I end up doing quite a lot when it comes to films. Because of the love that Wong Kar-wai's films got by that TikTok audience, I kind of subconsciously decided to disregard them entirely. And I don't mean to say that being on TikTok is a bad thing or whatever. It just has certain connotations tied to it, and while I might not agree with that now, that was certainly what my thought process was back then. Anyway, with all that said, and in somewhat recent news that Wong Kar-wai is rumoured to be working on his next film after over 10 years, I figured it would be a great time to watch through his entire filmography again and try my best to rank the films based on how much I enjoyed them. This list will only really include his feature-length films rather than everything he's ever worked on, such as TV shows and short films, just for convenience and because I've only really seen his 10 feature films. I'll also try and keep this as spoiler free as I can, but inevitably there's gonna be spoilers, so just bear that in mind. Oh yeah, before we start, I did actually want to mention that I completely wiped my really old Twitter account to make it link to this YouTube channel, so if you want to connect with me in some kind of way, it's best if you drop me a follow on there, as I'm going to try my best to be active. Okay, without further ado, this is the list. In the number 10 spot, we have The Grandmaster, which was released in 2013 and is actually the latest film in Wong Kar-wai's filmography at the time of this recording. Okay, look, maybe I'm not the most interested in martial arts films, I'm willing to admit that, because this film doesn't really stick out to me all that much. Visually, the film was amazing, as you'd come to expect with Wong Kar-wai. There's some great action sequences with a sense of precision in every cut, but despite that, the film kind of misses the mark for me. The movie centers on the life of Ip Man, a martial arts master. Based on this, you might expect an informative biopic on Ip Man, right? But the film fails to provide significant insights about its subject, and its presentation, while dramatic, lacks resonance or immersion. It's disappointing that a film by Wong Kar-wai, known for emotion and poetry, leaves me feeling indifferent. If the narrative had been approached in a more straightforward manner, it might have actually been effective and memorable, although it would definitely be a safer approach for Wong Kar-wai. Wong's surreal style, which has proven to be successful in romantic dramas, doesn't translate well to the structure of a martial arts film, or at least not this particular film. That being said, the cast did a phenomenal job and seemed like they naturally fit this kind of role, and perhaps I would have enjoyed this movie a whole lot more if it had been developed a little differently. At number 9, we have 2046, and man, where do I even start with this film? Initially, I was very torn on where to place it because I have a lot of mixed feelings about the film, but here it is at second to last. This plot just wasn't it, man. I'd say that I'm normally quite open-minded and that I can sit through a long film without feeling bored. I mean, I am a Pakistani guy who grew up with Bollywood. I can sit through a 2-hour plus movie with no issue. But 2046 was an absolute chore to sit through and had me constantly looking at the remaining runtime every 20 minutes or so to see when it would end quicker. And every single time I'd be shocked by how little time had elapsed. It takes a lot for me to do that, but I found myself doing this with The Grandmaster too. Nothing from this film really hooked me. For being a part of a loose trilogy with Days of Being Wild and In the Mood for Love, this movie felt so hollow and uncompelling. It sucks to say that I genuinely had no investment or care for anything that happened on screen, including the characters themselves. Don't get me wrong, I thought they were beautiful and put on some great performances, but there wasn't that deep longing and heartache and yearning I felt from Wong's other releases. Maybe that's besides the point, since 2046 seems to be more about loss and how to mend yourself after losing someone you love. But still, this fell so flat for me. The sci-fi stuff was ambitious, sure, and I'm all for that, but it felt like an idea that was thrown into an entirely separate story and didn't really do much for me at all. I think this film is a case of a good premise on paper, but very disappointing execution. I mean, aside from that, the cinematography and shots were cool enough to place it higher than the last one, so I'll give it that. At number 8, we have Ashes of Time, which is one of the 2 films by Wong released in 1994, and if I'm being completely honest, I was kind of confused throughout the duration of this film. This is an example of an ensemble film from Wong Kar-wai, where instead of focusing on a select pair of characters, there's a bunch thrown at you, leaving you a little overstimulated. Though the ensemble thing can definitely work, it is quite hit or miss to be honest, and it did kind of miss here. Wong Kar-wai's films often embrace narrative ambiguity, yet they typically remain understandable. However, even after reading the Wikipedia plot summary for this film, I found myself still puzzled by its storyline. But despite this confusion, I surprisingly enjoyed the film more than I thought I would. This speaks to Wong Kar-wai's talent in making Ashes of Time visually captivating, accepting its world and immersing myself within it for the duration of 93 minutes. Like The Grandmaster, Ashes of Time stands out in Wong's filmography as a martial arts film. However, I found myself enjoying this film more than The Grandmaster, as it feels more like a love letter to the genre, rather than a straightforward entry point. Considering the troubled production history of Ashes of Time, with Chungking Express being worked on alongside it, it's kind of impressive that the final product is as coherent as it is. Overall, the film, while not the greatest in Wong Kar-wai's filmography, still makes for a somewhat pleasant time. At number 7 is Happy Together, and I wanted to enjoy this film so much more than I actually did. Off top, the colour grading was really beautiful, and was paired well with some really stunning shots, which at this point is a given when it comes to Wong Kar-wai. The film presents a compelling portrayal of a rocky relationship between 2 individuals, emphasising the inevitability of their destructive and outright abusive dynamic. The movie captivates with its imagery, sure, but it takes a lot to get through this film. Despite its visual impact, the narrative fails to fully engage. The acting seems mismatched to the film's tone, leaving the characters and their story feeling distant and unexplored. While the dissolution of the relationship is depicted, the lack of depth in character development detracts from any real emotional investment. Considering its 90-minute runtime, I felt this film could benefit from a more gradual build-up to the climax, providing greater insight into the characters' inner worlds. And I know Wong Kar-wai likes to keep things ambiguous, but with this narrative in particular, I really don't think it would have hurt to just give us a little bit more information about these characters. Ultimately, this film falls short in offering a meaningful connection to its characters and storyline, but I still wouldn't go as far as to say I disliked it. Also, I'd love to hear someone's justification for keeping 3 whole unedited minutes of a single shot in the film. No, genuinely, what was up with that? Days of Being Wild is Wong Kar-wai's second ever film, and is the start of the trilogy that 2046 is also a part of. And to be honest, I can't quite put my finger on why I like this movie more than I should. This film is pretty raw and unfiltered, and is filled with some characters who are pretty unlikable. It's also not really a story I'm too fond of, following a guy who seems to treat all the women in his life as mere objects as a result of his own issues. I don't know if the film's intention was for me to empathize with him, but I really couldn't bring myself to. But despite this, I couldn't see this film being any lower on this list. There's something about this that just hits a little bit harder than the previously listed films, and maybe it's the way this film looks, or the feelings of yearning that this film captures, or maybe even that one really beautiful and poetic line about the 1 minute. Whatever it is, it's enough for me to say I quite enjoyed the film. There's a lot of good in this film despite the bad, and I think even Wong Kar-wai could see this, capitalizing on these elements in his films to come and crafting his signature style. I already know I'm going to be absolutely slaughtered for this. Chungking Express is at number 5, and it was also the first Wong Kar-wai film that I watched. From my understanding now, Wong Kar-wai is an acquired taste. He isn't going to click for you on your first watch, and perhaps that kind of taints my perception of this film a little bit, but as much as people claim for this to be an absolute masterpiece and Wong Kar-wai's best, it just hurts for me to say I disagree. Don't get me wrong, this film is amazing. I really loved the extreme motion blur at times and the really effective use of colour in this film. The dialogue and performances were top tier. There's everything you need to create an engaging experience. But for one, the music really throws me off. Okay, look, California Dreaming and Dreams are both really great songs respectively, but having them repeat every other scene gets tiring very, very quickly. And while maybe I'm missing the intended effect here, I just really think this film could have done without the repetition. One thing about Wong Kar-wai is that he loves a good needle drop, but I feel like this was too much of a good thing, and I just can't bring myself to say I enjoyed the fact I heard these songs so many times in the film. To be fair, his other films do also have this repetition gimmick, but it feels excessive here to the point where the novelty completely wears off. Also, why was the first story cut so short? I know this was probably a deliberate choice, and yes, while I did enjoy the second half quite a bit, I felt that there was so much more to unpack from the two characters in the first half, but their story just ends. I would have loved it if the two stories had an equal amount of time to prosper, because I feel like my overall engagement would have been so much higher. I'm aware this sounds very negatively worded, but all that aside, I do truly really like this film, and it was a great introduction to Wong Kar-wai for me despite my initial doubts. At number 4 we have another cult favourite, In the Mood for Love. Now this one, similar to Chungking Express, was weird to me in the sense I don't completely agree with everyone when they say that this is Wong Kar-wai's best film. I will begin by saying that wow, this is a really beautiful film. The depiction of yearning and the passage of time is really well done here, and when I think of colour in Wong Kar-wai's films, this is the film that comes straight to mind. Everything just feels so meticulously crafted, to the point where you just want to admire every frame. The acting is also very, very believable, and you can tell what the relationship between the two of them is saying without them even having to say a word. This is such a simple film on the surface, but there's so much depth here, and Wong Kar-wai of course makes it look effortless. I just feel like this film is really slowly paced, much more than you'd expect. There's a sense of nothing happening at times, and I don't necessarily think that this is a flaw. Unlike 2046, this film isn't really a chore to sit through. It just gives me so little to work with and base my opinion on, because when I say that nothing is happening, quite literally nothing is happening, making me think that those scenes of nothingness could have easily been traded for some fleshing out. So yeah, the reason this film isn't in the top 3 is because I feel like it didn't really prioritize its runtime, and I felt like it could have said so much more than it did. As Tears Go By, Wong Kar-wai's 1988 debut feature film has made it to number 3 in this list. After watching Chungking Express first, I wanted to watch Wong Kar-wai's filmography in order, and so of course As Tears Go By was the second film I'd watched by him, and to be honest, I still didn't really get it. I liked the vibes, sure, but I was still kind of indifferent. It wasn't until I was halfway through his filmography when I couldn't stop thinking about this film in particular. Something about it was lingering in the back of my mind until eventually I gave in and decided to give it another watch, and wow, what a film. I love how gritty and hard-hitting it is. What you traditionally expect from a Wong Kar-wai film with experimental narratives isn't present here, but that doesn't stop it from being so damn mesmerizing. Whether it's conventional or unconventional, he can do it all, it seems, but in a way, the DNA of your traditional Wong Kar-wai film can still be seen here. This film is essentially intertwining two love stories, one involving a romance and one involving brotherhood and the ultimate choice of deciding between the two. It's soul-crushing, action-packed, and simply sublime. The crime sequences, while not my typical cup of tea, still had me pretty immersed, and with the characters being so charming, it was hard not to be engaged. And that Cantonese cover of Take My Breath Away is just, wow, so perfectly used and executed. Like, it actually gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, and if that's not peak cinema, I don't know what is. I think the only reason I put this at number 3 is because it's up against number 1 and 2, where Wong Kar-wai succeeded just a smidge more for me. So yeah, I love this film, if you couldn't tell, and I wish more people saw just how much of a masterpiece it actually is. Also, the elephant in the room, because I know someone's gonna say it, the whole cousin love incest thing. Listen, I don't know why he went with this, I kind of wish he didn't, but maybe it symbolizes a forbidden love or something. Whatever man, I still love this film. Who would have thought that Fallen Angels would be this high up on this list? This film seems to be Wong Kar-wai's magnum opus, and for pretty damn good reason. Fallen Angels is probably Wong Kar-wai's most palatable film, and I mean that in the best way possible. This film isn't hard to digest, despite being in that unconventional Wong Kar-wai style. It just kind of clicks. There's just something so mesmerizing and intoxicating about this film that you just can't get it out of your head. The neon colors, the wacky camera work, the themes of love and loneliness, everything contributes to a visually stunning and emotionally powerful story. The film seamlessly blends various genres, effortlessly shifting from heart-pounding action to poignant drama, interspersed with moments of humor, tender expressions of love, and an enthralling soundtrack. The characters in this film are written so perfectly. The common thread among them is their absence of genuine romantic connections. While they may be in relationships, they don't adhere to the conventional norms. Essentially, these characters find themselves lonely in each other's company. While it may not offer the same satisfaction as true romance, they resign themselves to the idea that it might be their only option. Moreover, they strive to distinguish themselves and gain acknowledgement by any means necessary. Whether it's Blondie's vivid hair or the mute guy's questionable business tactics, they are willing to do whatever it takes to separate themselves in a world full of conformity. This is just such an effortlessly beautiful film that I can't even formulate my feelings on it. I just urge everyone to watch this film. There's not a single dull moment or anything that feels out of place. Wong Kar-wai set out to create a melancholy world, and he did just that. I love the fact that one of the characters can be directly tied to another from Chungking Express. I love how dreamlike everything feels. I love that the film is entirely set at night until the very final shot. I just love this film, man, and I feel even more stupid for not giving it a chance earlier. Okay, here comes the hottest take of all. My Blueberry Nights is my absolute favourite Wong Kar-wai film, and honestly one of my favourite films of all time. I can already feel the comments. No way bro put Wong Kar-wai's first and only English feature at number 1, how Anglo-centric. Okay, I know how it seems on first glance, but it's not like that at all. I don't know man, there's just something about this film that really intrigues me and has me in a chokehold. It's really unusual because despite not being set in Hong Kong, this is Wong Kar-wai on full display, and everything characteristic of an effective and beautiful film by him is present here. Someone put it so beautifully that this is cinema's 808s and heartbreak, and I couldn't agree more. It's a beautiful tale of longing and redemption, following a woman's journey of self-discovery as she navigates the landscapes of love and heartache, and the film transcends your typical romantic tropes, providing a nuanced insight into human relationships. From the vibrant colours to the sweeping camera movements, every frame is so calculated to evoke a sense of longing and nostalgia. Norah Jones just fits Wong Kar-wai. The vulnerability she presents still resonates with me today, and the fact that this was her acting debut is insane to me. I truly felt that chemistry between her and Jude Law's character, and their relationship served as the emotional core of this film. The anthology feel of the film, with Norah Jones tying the stories together, really worked for me, and it's such a shame we didn't get a chance to stay with these characters longer than we did. Rachel Weisz and Natalie Portman, phenomenal in their own right. There's just something really special here, and despite what others have said, I think Wong Kar-wai really achieved what he set out to do here, his signature style translating seamlessly into Western form. The story, about getting out of the love you couldn't keep, is such an important lesson of life. We embark on new paths, hoping to erase the past, yet it lingers. Ultimately, we make peace with memories, regrets, and ourselves. Returning to familiar ground, we find that we've grown, cherishing the good memories and making peace with the bad ones. I couldn't recommend this film more. It's just one of those films that you kind of have to see for yourself to truly appreciate it. This is my comfort movie, and this is my movie, and no one can ever say anything bad about it that will convince me otherwise. Anyway, that wraps up my ranking, and I am aware I have some terrible takes. What did you think of this ranking? Did you agree? Did you disagree? Do you think I should just be banned from ranking anything ever again? Wherever it is, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I will catch you guys in the next one.